Somewhere in the gray water of the North Atlantic swims a fish with a blunt head, a soft, pale belly, and a single small whisker beneath its chin. It doesn't leap like a marlin or shimmer like a tuna, yet this patient, unremarkable animal pulled fragile wooden ships across oceans, fed armies, financed empires, and moved the center of global power. For most of human history, oceanic expansion faced a harsh biological limit. Sailors needed dense calories to survive months at sea, but fatty meats and fish spoil rapidly. The oil inside them turns rancid, and even heavy salting cannot fully stop the rot. This diagram illustrates the Atlantic cod's unique advantage. Because its white flesh holds almost no fat, it defies the normal spoilage curve. When split open, packed in salt, and dried in the wind, it becomes as stiff as a plank of pale wood. It weighs practically nothing and refuses to rot. In an age before refrigeration, this chemistry made dried cod the first truly portable meal. Soaking it in fresh water brought it back to life as tender, flaky protein, giving humanity the exact fuel it needed to cross the open ocean. Long before Southern Europe dreamed of new maritime routes, the Norse recognized this utility. In the frigid, dry air of Scandinavia, they didn't need salt. They simply had to hang the fish on wooden racks and let the winter storms freeze and dry the flesh simultaneously, creating a nearly indestructible leather-like provision known as stockfish. This preservation method gave Viking warriors the physical endurance to push out across the North Atlantic in open boats. It is the fuel that allowed Leif Erikson to reach the coast of North America around the year 1000, roughly 5 centuries before Columbus. Later, Basque sailors combined their access to warm weather salt with deep ocean navigation to dominate medieval European markets. They were selling quantities of preserved cod so massive that local European waters couldn't possibly account for the volume. They had tapped into a secret, seemingly inexhaustible fishing ground far out in the Atlantic. Because the Basques kept their fishing grounds a secret, the flood of salted fish appearing in European markets seemed to come from an inexhaustible source. This created the first impression that the ocean was a treasury that could never be emptied. That secret fishing ground remained largely hidden until 1497, when an Italian navigator named John Cabot, sailing for England, stumbled upon a fog-bound coast he called the Newfoundland. His crew reported waters so dense with cod they could barely row, pulling up loaded baskets simply by lowering them over the side. This map of the seafloor off Newfoundland shows exactly why Cabot found such density. Vast underwater plateaus, known as the Grand Banks, sit at a shallow depth where a cold Arctic current sweeps down to collide with a warm southern current. This churns up nutrients, feeding massive blooms of plankton, which feed small fish, which in turn feed the cod. News of this discovery hit Europe exactly when it was desperate for fish. The Catholic Church governed the spiritual and dietary life of the continent, strictly forbidding the consumption of warm-blooded animals on fast days, feast days, and the long season of Lent. For over half the calendar year, millions of Europeans needed an affordable protein replacement. Fresh fish spoiled too quickly to reach inland towns, but salted, dried cod could be stored indefinitely and shipped anywhere, satisfying the nutritional needs of wealthy aristocrats and poor peasants alike. By turning a perishable animal into a stable commodity, cod became a currency of survival. To control the supply of these dried planks was to control the literal diet of a continent, placing the fish at the center of European daily life and commerce. As fishermen crossed the ocean to harvest the Grand Banks, many built settlements and stayed. The early colonists of New England lacked fertile plantation soil or a warm climate, so they turned to the sea. Boys grew up on boats, harbors expanded, and an entire colonial economy was built on the back of dried fish. The wealth generated by this catch was so vital to Massachusetts that they hung a carved wooden model in the chamber where their government met. They called it the sacred cod, a permanent symbol of their reliance on this bottom feeder. But the curing process produced varying qualities of fish, including broken and heavily damaged pieces that European buyers rejected. Merchants gave this lowest grade a specific name, the West India cure. Plantation owners in the Caribbean sugar islands refused to waste valuable land growing food for their laborers. They needed the cheapest possible calories shipped in from elsewhere. New England merchants eagerly supplied the West India cure, packing off their damaged cod to feed the enslaved Africans who worked the sugar fields in conditions of extreme cruelty. Ships delivered the cod to the islands, loaded up on molasses produced by slave labor, returned to New England to distill it into rum, and sailed to Africa to trade that rum for human beings. The earliest prosperity of the New World relied on a commercial triangle that linked the abundance of the Grand Banks directly to the machinery of human slavery. For hundreds of years, the ocean's bounty appeared endless, largely because the technology of extraction had natural physical limits. Men sailed out from harbors on graceful wooden schooners, then rowed into freezing waters in tiny flat-bottomed dories to set handlines. One man in a small boat can only pull so many fish from the sea. The arrival of steam and diesel power erased those limits. By the mid-20th century, floating processing plants the size of city blocks began operating on the Grand Banks, equipped with military-grade sonar to hunt schools of fish, and enormous nets dragged across the seafloor. A single factory freezer trawler could catch in 1 hour what an entire fleet of wooden schooners might have caught in a season. As foreign industrial fleets swept through rich waters, nations heavily dependent on fishing fought back. Iceland, watching its primary resource being liquidated by British trawlers, initiated a series of aggressive maritime standoffs known as the Cod Wars. Icelandic patrol boats used special cutters to slice British nets, while warships rammed competing vessels. The tiny island nation ultimately won the standoff, forcing the world to accept a new legal standard where a country could claim the sea for 200 nautical miles out from its coast. Yet drawing new lines on a map did not alter the grim mathematics of the deep. Whether regulated by domestic fleets or foreign armadas, human beings were catching cod faster than cod could reproduce. The older breeding fish were wiped out, and catches grew steadily younger and smaller. Scientists issued severe warnings, but fishing continued until the population fell to a tiny fraction of its historical size. On July 2, 1992, the Canadian government declared a total moratorium on northern cod fishing on the Grand Banks. The decree ended a 500-year-old way of life overnight. The collapse triggered the largest single layoff in Canadian history, wiping out tens of thousands of jobs. Coastal communities that had lived entirely off the cod for centuries suddenly fell silent, leaving harbors empty and homes abandoned to the elements. Decades passed, and the fish did not bounce back. The industrial assault had been so thorough that the underlying balance of the ecosystem itself had fractured. Other species moved in to fill the void, locking the cod population into a state of severe, prolonged depletion. Within a single human lifetime, the richest fishing ground on Earth was spent down to nearly nothing. The collapse of the Grand Banks serves as the final evidence that no abundance is truly infinite, revealing that a natural edge exists even when we are most certain it does not. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden stories behind this everyday object, hit the like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what everyday item we should investigate next.